Hey, what's going on everybody? My name is Arya, and in this video I'm going to be talking about how to crush game dev job interviews and get that job that you want. So this video might be a little bit longer than my usual ones, but I'm going to do my best to keep it as short and dense as possible. So let's just get right into it. So the first step obviously is to prepare for the interview. What I like to do first is go over the job listing for the interview and make sure to bring up some key points that I see in the listing. So if the listing says something like we're looking for a detail-oriented person, I make sure to mention something like that in my interview so I immediately stand out as the type of candidate that they're looking for. Another really good tip that I think everyone should do is obviously study the company that you're applying for, the studio, and definitely, if possible, play some of their games. I've had a lot of experiences where I've been able to talk with designers at studios about the games they've made, and a lot of times they'll ask questions like, oh, what would you change about the game? What did you like? What didn't you like? And this is a really good opportunity for you to demonstrate that you have some knowledge in the video game space and you're able to, critically dissect why you like or dislike a certain game or, certain aspects about the game. And this can be a really good talking point, especially for game design roles. Although this video is mainly going to focus on game development interviews instead, so more on the engineering side. So another really good tip I have is don't overdress. We see this a lot in interviews where people come in with like a full suit or they come in, like super dressed up. That is not going to look good, trust me. Most game developers are really chill, laid back people. So if you go in there with a suit, you're just immediately going to send out a vibe that, is not super compatible with what their culture is like. The best thing I would say is dress sort of like business casual, like something like this, or something maybe even more casual, like a t-shirt or like a sweater. As long as you look presentable, right? Like just make sure you look good. And another really, really, really important thing is to make sure you write down the questions that you want to ask them beforehand. The worst thing that you could possibly do is get to the end of the interview and then they ask you, oh, do you have any questions for us? And then you're just like, oh, no, I don't have any questions for you. That's going to look really bad. It's going to make it seem like you're not interested in the role. So definitely make sure you write down some questions beforehand. And if you know who your interviewer is going to be, this is sort of like an optional step, but if you know who your interviewer is going to be, I like to do a quick Google search of my interviewers before I go into an interview, and that sort of helps me settle some nerves because I get to see a little bit more about who they are, and I sort of get to get a little bit of an insight into their background, and that sort of helps settle my nerves. Again, that's optional. If it helps you, go for it. If not, then don't worry about it. Okay. So usually with these interviews, whether it's one interview or multiple interviews, usually there's different parts. And usually the first one is something they call a behavioral interview. So this part of the interview process is not really based on your skills and your technical expertise. This part is more based on who you are as a person. Is your personality compatible with the rest of the team? So my best tips for the behavioral section would be to be yourself and just be authentic. The worst thing you can do is try to be somebody you're not, because it's just not going to work out. Either you're going to suck at being somebody you're not and they're going to see that, or they're going to like who you're pretending to be, but then you have to keep up that facade for the whole time you work there. Just be yourself, be authentic, and the right studio will want you for you. In these behavioral sections, you want to make sure that you're being confident. That's a really important thing, because usually the people you're talking to in these behavioral sections, they're probably not technical people. It might be like a recruiter, or it might be, somebody at the studio who's not necessarily in a technical role. So they can't really even judge how good you are on your skills, right? So try to, be confident when you're talking about yourself and your qualifications. Maybe drop in a few like tech buzzwords in there. But don't go overboard with the jargon, because they're not going to really be able to understand it. And if it gets a little too esoteric, then they might not go forward with you, right? And I think a good rule of thumb for the behavioral section of these interviews is just to treat it like a conversation more than an interview. Because if you're just sort of having a conversation with the person you're talking to and you're asking them questions while they're asking you questions, you're just going to form a really good relationship right off the bat. And then that recruiter or whoever you're interviewing with, they're going to, pass along the notes to the hiring manager that, yeah, this person was really cool and I really like talking to this person. So that's going to give you some really good points for the next round. So the next part is usually the technical section of the interview process. I'm not gonna lie to you, this part can be pretty tough. And this is probably where I think most candidates are either gonna make it or not make it. I don't know, actually, it might also be behavioral. Who knows? Whatever, doesn't matter. So for the technical section, I can only really speak for Unity game developers because that's my role and I'm able to draw on my experiences for that. But definitely what you want to do is you just got to study the crap out of Unity. I'm going to post a free resource for everybody, which is going to be a full repository of questions that you can look at. But yeah, you just basically want to make sure you know stuff about your game engine, you know the pros and cons of it, you know all the different components, stuff like that. You want to make sure you have your knowledge about the game engine down pat. Because ultimately, there's no way to cheat the technical test, okay? It's not really possible to cheat it. They're gonna find out how much you know, and they're not gonna hire somebody who doesn't know the basic fundamentals of the game engine, right? So you just gotta make sure you study it and you know all that stuff. So usually in these technical interviews, you also have to do something called a whiteboard coding interview. So you'll have to either, if it's in person, write on a whiteboard, or if it's online, it's usually on like a Google Doc, where the interviewer is gonna give you some coding problem, and you're gonna have to write some code for it. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, these can be pretty tough, okay, for a number of reasons. Number one, you have all the stress, and the nerves, and you know that somebody that is, watching you who knows probably more than you do about how stuff is supposed to work. So you just have that pressure in the back of your head, but you're also not working inside a code editor, right? You're working inside a Google Docs or on a physical whiteboard. So you don't have any autocorrect or any autocomplete. You're on your own. It's like the Wild West, okay? So first tip is don't worry about syntax. Try to get it right, but don't get too in the weeds with syntax, okay? That's not important. Make sure you talk through your thought process as you're solving these coding problems, because even if you don't get the right answer, if you're able to explain your thought process as you're solving the problem, it's gonna show to the interviewer that you're somebody who is gonna be really easy to pair program with, which is a pretty common thing that you'll probably have to do on the job. And that is when you work with other programmers to solve a problem together. So talking about your thought process as you're solving problems is gonna be super key. Don't be afraid to take some time in the beginning when you first get the coding problem just to think about it. It's totally okay to just take like 2 to 3 minutes, just take silently thinking to yourself before you maybe like immediately dive into it. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Questions are good, right? If you think of edge cases or you have questions about the problem, it's going to show that you're thinking deeply about it and you're detail oriented. So those are all good. Make sure you do that. Something that usually trips me up in these sort of interviews is after I go through the problem and I come up with my first solution, the interviewer always, without fail, is going to ask you how can you improve the solution. This is like no matter how good your first solution is, they're going to ask you how you can improve it. So be ready for that. Try to think about it. A lot of times using a better data structure is an improvement, maybe using some sort of caching techniques to reduce the complexity. Yeah, stuff like that, is stuff you're gonna need to add to your solution as they keep asking you to improve it. Another really, this is probably the most important thing actually with these whiteboard coding interviews, is you need to know your time and space complexity, big O notation. You need to know that stuff inside and out, because I guarantee you they're gonna ask. And even if they don't ask, if you're able to just tell them in the interview, oh yeah, blah, blah, my solution is, log n time complexity, whatever. It's gonna show them that you're not just some, regular programmer. You're not just some screw-up programmer. There's thousands of them, right? You are a proper software engineer, okay? And you know how the code is going to affect the time and space complexity. This is very key because it's going to show that you're, a straight up engineer who can build good shit. So definitely study the time and space complexity stuff and definitely, talk about that in your solution. There's also another type of technical test where you might get stuff like a take-home test. So they'll send you like multiple choice test or something of that sort online that you have to do. Those are not too bad usually, but just be prepared for something like that. You might also have like a take-home project. The studio will ask you to go off and make a game, and you have like 3 or 4 hours to do it, and they give you like a an outline of what they're looking for. When you're doing something like that, when you're taking home a project and you're building something in a few hours to give back to them, the most important thing I can stress about those type of interviews is that you need to follow a really strict and proper coding architecture. So let's say you're working in Unity, because that's what I know. If you're just like throwing mono behaviors onto everything and there's no sort of organization in your code whatsoever, you are not going to be a standout candidate. You're just not, okay? Because anybody with half a year of Unity experience is able to do that, right? If you're taking home a project, what they're looking for is, are you going to have some type of code architecture there? So something like MVC. For those of you who don't know, that stands for Model View Controller. It's a type of coding principle, architecture, whatever you want to call it. It's like a standard you can follow. So definitely, if you're doing a take-home project, make sure you have some sort of, like MVC pattern, something that actually makes your code, legitly architectured and not just like mushed together, random pieces. So that's it for the technical interviews. I think I pretty much went over the main points I wanted to drive home, but I'm also providing a free resource for everybody watching this video. It's going to be in the description. It's going to be a huge list of behavioral and technical questions that I've personally gotten in interviews, as well as some key points for each for how to answer them well. So that's my treat to you. It's completely free. Just click the link in the description and, there's a free study guide. I really hope it can help you. At the end of the interview, they're going to ask you if you have any questions that you want to ask, and this is a really important time for you to ask some questions. Definitely, you don't want to get here and have no questions for them, because that's just going to make you look uninterested, right? It's just not going to make you look good. So make sure you have a few questions prepared beforehand, probably write them down, and this is your opportunity to ask them. I've also included a list of questions like this in the resource for you. So if you're totally stumped, once again, check the free resource. There's going to be some sample questions that you can ask. And then lastly, before you actually end the interview, this is sort of like your ending remarks. This is your sales pitch. This is your last chance to give them a pitch as to why you think that you're, the best candidate for this job, why you want it, why you're going to be a great fit for them, how you're going to give them value, by them hiring you. So I would suggest to people, write down a few sentences, like your sales pitch of why you want the job and whatnot, and practice this. Practice this in the mirror, in the bathroom, whatever. Practice this several times, and make sure that when the time comes for you to give your sales pitch, you're going to give the best damn sales pitch ever. You're basically selling yourself. Post-interview. Okay, so the interview's done now. It ended, it went good, you're feeling good. Here's what you do next. You're gonna write an email to every interviewer that you had, in the process, and you're just gonna thank them for their time and consideration. You're gonna say something like, I'm really interested and I'm really excited. Obviously, make it sound nice. I'm just paraphrasing right now what you should say. And if there were some questions that you weren't able to answer during the interview, this is a great time to answer them now. You could be like, hey, I know I wasn't able to answer your question about colliders in Unity, but I looked it up and here's the answer. Because this is going to show that you have good follow-up skills, you're detail-orientated, and, you write stuff down maybe in interviews. That's another great point, by the way. Make sure you write notes in interviews. Make sure they see you writing notes, because that's going to show them that you're, super detail-orientated, and of course, that's a super plus for any candidate. And then if you don't hear back in over 2 weeks, or by the time that they told you might hear back, I would say send another email as well, like another follow-up. And this one could just be like, hey, I'm just following up about the job. If you've made any decisions, or when I can expect to hear back. And in this email, this follow-up email, again, make sure to reiterate your interest and excitement in possibly getting that job. Now I just want to give you guys some mindset advice, okay? This is what I like to call having an indestructible mindset. And this is sort of like generic advice that applies to all job hunting. And that is that it's a numbers game. You'll have to apply to so many studios. If it's your first game dev job, you're gonna have to apply to so many different studios just to get a few interviews. And of those few interviews, you're maybe gonna get, a few job offers out of that, right? This is a numbers game. Be prepared for rejection. And know that that doesn't mean that you're not good enough. It just means that you weren't the type of candidate that studio was looking for. And the right studio is out there and it's waiting for you to find them. That's what I genuinely believe. And that's what I genuinely believe you need to believe in order to be successful. That's the sort of mindset that you need to have. And I know it's hard. Rejection sucks, When you get rejection after rejection, you're gonna start to feel like, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I'm not able to do this. Maybe I'm not worthy of this. But ultimately, it's just gonna come down to how badly you want it, right? If this is your dream, if this is what you want to do with your life, then no amount of rejection can stop you. You can go through rejection after rejection until you finally get to the end of the tunnel and you get your first game dev job. You can make it happen, I promise you. That's it for the video, guys. I really hope that you guys all found it helpful. Please make sure you check out the resource I have for you in the description. It's completely free. It's my treat to you. It has behavioral questions with good answering tips, technical questions with the answers, sample questions that you can ask at the end of the interview, whiteboard tips, just a bunch of stuff. It's really all encompassing. So I really hope that helps you out. And if you have any questions or if you have any other ways that I can help you, please let me know in the comments, because that's what I want to do. I want to help you guys achieve your dreams like I was able to achieve mine. And I guess my last bit of wisdom I'll leave you guys with is you can do anything that you set your mind to. That's something I genuinely believe. If you set your mind to something, it's something you truly want, and you work hard and you're determined and nothing can stop you, I promise you will get to that goal. And as long as you have a good portfolio and you're able to get through these interviews, you're gonna get your first game dev job, I promise you. So yeah, that's it for me, guys. I hope it was helpful. Leave me a comment, like, share, subscribe, the whole works. I would really appreciate it. And I will see you in the next video. Peace out.